Good evening and thanks for joining us. The top stories today. The FBI is reportedly investigating North Carolina Senator Richard Burr after he sold off his stocks ahead of the pandemic's hit to the economy. Burr is now set to step down effective tomorrow. Wisconsin's highest court strikes down a state lockdown order. President Trump praising the decision on Twitter, but some of the state's counties will now enforce their own local lockdown orders anyway. There is disagreement over when students should go back to school, but one school in Montana is inching towards it by letting students come in for one-on-one instruction. A Fresno lawmaker was given 3 citations of battery after attacking a group of people. One of the victims is calling it unjustifiable and wants him to resign. And concern is rising in Wuhan as the city rolls out mass testing. Videos show worrisome scenes at test sites. In our top story this evening, North Carolina Senator Richard Burr is stepping down from his post as Senate Intelligence Committee chairman. The FBI is reportedly investigating his stock sales during the early days of the pandemic. Burr sold stocks around the time he was briefed behind closed doors about the threat, but his attorney says he made the decision to sell based on publicly available information.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell made the announcement on Thursday. McConnell explained that Senator Burr told him he'd step aside as chairman of the Intelligence Committee while the FBI's investigation is carried out. The Los Angeles Times reported, citing anonymous sources, the FBI served Burr with a search warrant and took his cell phone earlier in the week. The news outlet said it was done as part of the agency's investigation into Burr's stock sales. Burr was among senators who sold stocks earlier this year as intelligence officials delivered closed-door updates on the then-emerging threat from the CCP virus. The economic downturn from efforts to slow the virus began after that. Burr sold between $628,000 and $1.7 million of his stocks on February 13th. His attorney told Newsroom ProPublica that the lawmaker did nothing wrong and participated in the stock market based on public information. The FBI has not responded to a request for comment. The decision to step down goes into effect at the end of the day on Friday.
And Wisconsiners are back in the state's bars after the Supreme Court struck down the governor's stay-at-home order. The governor had been slowly relaxing the lockdown, but many residents weren't willing to wait any longer.
President Trump on Thursday applauded a Wisconsin Supreme Court decision striking down a virus lockdown order a day before. One of the justices compared the state's continued lockdown to the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. She used the example to demonstrate the damage a state's use of unchecked emergency powers could cause. It's the first time a state Supreme Court has taken down a state's lockdown order. Residents flocked to bars on Wednesday evening after the court sided with lawmakers. They argued the state's top public health official exceeded her authority by imposing restrictions on businesses and daily life. Schools will remain closed until at least fall. President Trump referenced the ruling on Twitter, saying, "Its Democrat governor was forced by the courts to let the state open. The people want to get on with their lives. The place is bustling." Hitting back at the court ruling, Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers urged residents to stay home, practice social distancing, and limit travel. The mayor of Wisconsin's largest city said his stay-at-home order would remain intact. Some counties also issue replacement orders that effectively keep the stay-at-home order going in those areas. Governor Evers says things could get confusing if each of Wisconsin's 72 counties make different rules.
Wisconsin has seen more than 11,000 confirmed virus cases and over 400 people have died. And right across the nation, there is debate on when and how to reopen schools. President Trump says right now is not the right time, but they should be opened as soon as possible. One of his top advisors, though, has hinted that they shouldn't be opened until a vaccine is ready.
Figuring out how to restart school in the fall is proving to be a big test for Americans. Montana is among the first in the nation to move towards letting students come back to school.
The majority of our families wanted to come back at the middle high school level. And it was about 64% at the middle high school that said if we were to open, they would come back.
But for now, in-person sessions are one-on-one and by appointment only for this Montana school. The superintendent said they are discussing how to reopen this fall. He says what's most important is to move forward.
But we thought it was important that we try to make steps to move forward, even though they're small steps.
Moving forward is on President Trump's mind, too, saying in a meeting with governors Wednesday that he'd like to see schools open.
And then some shouldn't open them quite yet. You know, they're not ready. They went through a lot and they're not quite ready. But no, we're opening our country. People want it open. The schools are going to be open.
He seems to be at odds with Dr. Fauci's comments on the matter. On Tuesday, Fauci told lawmakers about a possible second outbreak that could happen in the fall.
Having treatments available or a vaccine to facilitate the re-entry of students into the fall term would be something that would be a bit of a bridge too far.
Trump publicly said Thursday that he disagrees with Fauci's comments. One idea some states have considered is to have a rotating class schedule, with some students attending morning classes and others going in the afternoon. Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Many colleges and universities, especially in the South, are set to reopen for in-person instruction starting this fall. And in California, a lawmaker was cited for attacking 3 people this week. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on a story that started with a knock on the door and quickly escalated into a controversy.
Central California City Councilman was given 3 citations of battery for attacking a group of people on Tuesday. Fresno City Council President Miguel Arias attacked conservative activist and journalist Ben Burquam and 2 others just outside of his home. The councilman said in a statement that the group threatened his children's safety after they knocked on his door, but Burquam denies this and calls Arias' behavior unjustifiable. Burquam is seen in this video posted to Facebook approaching the door of Arias' residence with a microphone and camera crew. He had pointed questions for Arias about the economic effects of the councilman's attempts to keep Fresno in lockdown.
As he's saying no to me saying, "Can I ask you a question?" he's lunging out the door, grabbing me, and then ultimately trying to throw me down the stairs, knocking my equipment out of my hands. And at that point, that's an assault. And then it's a different story. And the reason we stuck around was I wanted to make sure that he was held accountable for that behavior. There's no justification for that behavior.
Burquam said they weren't there to protest and initially only wanted to confirm that Arias lived in that district. The Democratic lawmaker told ABC 30 Action News that they were trying to break into his home, which didn't line up with the video. We contacted the Fresno Police Department for more answers, but they didn't immediately respond to comment. Now Burquam thinks Arias should resign.
I think he should resign. I mean, I think that behavior is it's unjustifiable. But at minimum, he should acknowledge that his behavior was wrong.
He said he'll also try to pursue charges against Arias if the district attorney deems it a valid case. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
And in New York, the police union calls for Health Commissioner Dr. Barbeau to resign or be fired over heated comments she made. And New York City's Thursday virus figures show a big improvement in the situation there.
New York City police unions are calling for Health Commissioner Dr. Barbeau to be fired. The call comes after she allegedly showed contempt for New York police officers in a dispute over personal protective equipment in March. Chief of Detectives Terrence Monahan asked Dr. Barbeau for 500,000 masks for New York's finest when he reportedly received a rude response from her. The request was denied, and NYPD was told they would instead receive 50,000. She has since apologized for her words. The apology was accepted by Chief Monahan. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio said on Thursday that all key virus indicators are declining. Most notably, ICU admissions are down from over 560 to 517. Hospital admissions and the percentage of people testing positive are also shrinking.
3 for 3, a perfect day, New York City. So let's now put together a bunch of them, and that's what's going to help us take the next big step forward.
He hinted that if progress continues, some restrictions could begin to lift in the first half of June. Governor Andrew Cuomo says 5 regions in central New York are now ready to open. Businesses in these regions can take their first steps towards reopening on Friday, when the statewide stay-at-home order lapses. But he warned about possible future emergencies and made it clear that the U.S. should no longer rely on other countries like China for basic medical supplies.
And we don't even have basic equipment for nurses and doctors. And so much of it came from China. And governors such as myself are trying to figure out who do we know in China.
Also on Thursday, U.S. President Donald Trump dispatched $3.9 billion in federal funding to New York's Public Transit Authority, the MTA.
And good news for anyone near New York City, the Jersey Shore will be open in time for Memorial Day. Beaches and lakefronts can reopen, but gatherings such as concerts and fireworks won't be allowed just yet. And in other news, the State Department is demanding China stop trying to steal research related to virus vaccines. Mike Pompeo has warned U.S. companies of the threat and says it's just the latest example of the Chinese regime's counterproductive actions during the pandemic.
The U.S. Department of State is blaming hackers connected to the Chinese regime for trying to steal U.S. research into a virus vaccine. On Wednesday, the FBI and the Cybersecurity Agency warned companies researching the virus of the potential threat. The FBI notes the regime uses cyber actors and non-traditional collectors to steal U.S. intellectual property related to vaccines, treatment, and testing. Non-traditional collectors include professors and researchers, who are basically spies in broad daylight. The U.S. Department of State, in a statement to the press, has called on the People's Republic of China to cease this malicious activity. The statement goes on to say the PRC's behavior in cyberspace is an extension of its counterproductive actions throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. This isn't the first time the Chinese regime has been suspected of international theft. In February, the FBI ramped up investigations into China-related economic espionage. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's statement concludes that while the U.S. and its allies are working together to save lives, the Chinese regime continues to silence scientists, journalists, and citizens and to spread disinformation, which has exacerbated the dangers of this health crisis.
In international news, new numbers coming from the UK show that a huge percentage of deaths happen in nursing homes. And in Japan, the Prime Minister has partly lifted the country's state of emergency.
More than 40% of all virus deaths in England and Wales have been in nursing homes. A new report from the London School of Economics shows the virus is to blame for more than 22,000 deaths in nursing homes in the two countries. British opposition parties blame Boris Johnson and the government for these deaths because they allegedly downplayed the risks of the virus. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe lifted a state of emergency in large parts of the country on Thursday. It was removed in 39 of Japan's 47 prefectures. But he says it will remain in place in Tokyo and other major cities until the virus is contained. An agency which approves medicines for the European Union said that a vaccine to counter the virus could be approved in about a year in an optimistic scenario. The head of the agency said they are investigating 115 different therapeutics for the virus. Some of those treatments could be approved in Europe as early as this summer, though he didn't specify which ones.
And coming up next, Wuhan residents worried about cross-infection as mass testing gets underway in the city. Videos show worrisome scenes at test sites. That and more when we return.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
There's rising concern of virus spread as Wuhan rolls out its mass testing, with videos showing worrisome scenes at test sites. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
On May 12th, Wuhan began a 10-day initiative to test its entire 11 million residents for the CCP virus. This video shows medical staff and police at one testing station. At a May 11th meeting, the CCP secretary for Wuhan called the current situation the new normal in epidemic prevention and control. A local resident posted on social media that their 5,000-person community is locked down. You can enter, but you can't freely leave. Residents are upset. Some have work commitments, but they can't leave, which means unemployment. They have no income and no way to support their family. More than 1 million people in Wuhan will be tested every day. In this video, people are unable to maintain social distancing while lining up. Some netizens who got tested were worried when medical staff didn't change gloves. One wrote, "I was a bit worried. The medical worker was wearing protective clothing and gloves during the test, but I didn't see him put on new gloves before it. Is there a risk of cross-infection if he doesn't change gloves before administering a cotton swab into each person's throat?" A Wuhan citizen, Mr. Wang, told us he believes there are 4 reasons for the large-scale testing. First, the 2 most important Chinese political meetings will be held on May 21st. The Chinese regime wants to show they are strengthening measures in combating the virus and make Wuhan residents stay at home during the testing period so they can't spread the virus elsewhere. Second, Chinese authorities want to find some asymptomatic cases and shift the blame to them. Third, to use up the testing kits that were exported to other countries and later returned because of their low accuracy. Fourth, there are already many cases in the city and authorities can no longer cover it up and have to come clean. He believes some patients at makeshift hospitals were released in March and April on political orders, even though they still hadn't recovered and they've already infected other people. This video shows a man lying unconscious inside a Wuhan park. He was later taken away by ambulance. The video was reportedly taken on May 10th. Taiwan Pochin Group is the world's largest athletic and casual footwear manufacturer for major global brands like Nike and Adidas. But it was forced to close its Hubei factory, with more than 4,000 employees losing their jobs. According to Chinese media, Pochin's total revenue for the first 4 months fell by 22%, the lowest it's been in 6 years. According to Radio Free Asia, Li Henqing, director of the Washington Information and Strategy Institute, said China's economy is entering a phase of decline because of its imbalanced economy, the U.S.-China trade war, and the pandemic. Some Chinese economists estimate China's unemployment rate is between 20% to 25%, far exceeding the Chinese official figure of 6.2% in February and 5.9% in March.
The use of Chinese drones by American law enforcement is being investigated by members of the House Judiciary Committee. The Chinese manufacturer DJI loaned 100 drones to state and local forces in April to help with social distancing enforcement. But there are concerns about what data the drones are collecting and where it's being sent.
Republicans from the House Judiciary Committee have opened an inquiry into the use of Chinese drones by state and local law enforcement. The company that makes them is Dajiang Innovation, known as DJI. A number of federal agencies have already warned against the use of DJI drones on suspicion that the devices may send sensitive data to the Chinese Communist regime. The U.S. military banned their use in 2017, but in April the company loaned 100 drones to local law enforcement entities for enforcing social distancing rules. The lawmakers now want to know if the Department of Justice and Department of Homeland Security are monitoring the loan program and if they're taking any actions in response. They also want details on any guidance the Department of Homeland Security has given to states and local areas that have purchased or received DJI products. By default, the drones reportedly send flight logs, video, and audio to DJI's servers. Users need to manually turn off the data collection to prevent it. Most Chinese companies are unlikely to be independent of the CCP, which has legal access to company resources.
Up next, a rare illness is affecting young New Yorkers. Some suspect it may be linked to the CCP virus, but doubts remain. We take a closer look after the break.
How do we get to this point Back in December, the coronavirus was already spreading in Wuhan, and the Chinese Communist Party was covering it up and punishing the whistleblowers who dared to report the truth. Their actions led to this pandemic, which now has us, in America, stuck in our homes and losing our jobs. To this very day, the Communist Party is still lying, making it more critical than ever for us to get honest reporting about China. The Epoch Times is able to bring you the uncensored truth because we maintain a network of underground sources inside of China, hidden from the censors of the communist government. For instance, our investigative team has been contacting individual funeral homes, hospitals, and they've obtained leaked internal documents which show that China's official numbers are massively underreported by a factor of at least 10. If you're looking for an honest source of news that can keep you informed and safe, check out The Epoch Times. Go to readepoch.com and try your first month for just $1 and get real journalism delivered straight to your doorstep.
A rare inflammatory illness has killed 3 young people in New York State. Researchers are studying if there's any relationship between the rare sickness and COVID-19, but so far there's no conclusive evidence that COVID is the cause. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more.
The New York State Department of Health is investigating 102 cases of a rare inflammatory syndrome in children under 21 years old. The illness presents similar symptoms as Kawasaki disease and toxic shock syndrome, such as rash, bloodshot eyes, prolonged fever, diarrhea, and vomiting. Kawasaki disease can lead to inflammation of the heart. This rare syndrome has taken the lives of 3 young New Yorkers. Attention has been growing over the possible link between the inflammatory syndrome and COVID-19. Among the scientific community, there is no conclusive evidence that shows COVID causes the inflammatory syndrome. On Wednesday, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo addressed the inflammatory syndrome and made the assumption that it is a manifestation of COVID, asserting the unproven claim that it is caused by COVID.
It's an inflammation of the blood vessels, which could affect the heart. So it's more of a cardiac case than a respiratory case, which is a new manifestation of the COVID virus.
Most of the young people who have this rare illness in New York are either COVID positive or have the antibodies, meaning they previously had COVID. But 14% of the cases tested negative for COVID and tested negative for the antibodies, meaning they did not have COVID and never had COVID. We spoke with an infectious disease expert at Johns Hopkins University. He says the inflammatory syndrome and COVID are temporally linked, simply meaning they are happening at the same time.
Right now, there have been some clusters of cases, a very small number in children that are coincident with the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think this is an interesting linkage, but it's not proven yet.
He says we do not have all the data on this yet, and that it's important to actually prove causation before we definitively discuss this link. Kevin Hogan, NTD News, New York.
In our business briefings, another 3 million Americans filed for unemployment claims for the first time last week. But it's the 8th week in a row where unemployment claims have decreased.
Another 3 million Americans filed initial unemployment claims last week. It's the 8th week in a row the number for initial claims decreased, after peaking at 6.9 million in the last week of March. It brings the total number of people making first-time claims since mid-March to 36.5 million. Tyson Foods says the firm will cut prices on some beef products amid the pandemic. The company added the decision will benefit people working in the supply chain and cattle industry, as well as consumers. The move comes as some grocery stores across the country increase prices on meat. The head of the World Trade Organization is expected to step down earlier than planned. 62-year-old Brazilian Roberto Azevedo has been Director General of the WTO since 2013. His second term was due to end in August 2021. He's expected to inform members at a virtual meeting today. The WTO says it will make an announcement soon after. The International Olympic Committee says postponing the Tokyo 2020 Games will likely cost the organization up to $800 million. The 2020 Olympics were slated to start in July of this year, but were postponed until 2021 because of the CCP virus pandemic. IOC President Thomas Bach would not speak about a possible further delay to the Games.
And coming up, A marine mammal park in Hong Kong is on the verge of going out of business, but one thing hasn't changed: the staff's determination to take care of the park's residents. More on that after the break.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
At the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people. I'm a little freaked out that that many people have seen my face. In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the sole source of edutainment worldwide.
A marine mammal amusement park in Hong Kong is facing possible bankruptcy without its usual visitors. But staff say they're determined to care for the animals despite the lockdown.
In wake of the pandemic, businesses around the globe are feeling a sense of uncertainty over whether or not they can survive financially. Hong Kong's Ocean Park is no exception. The region's lockdown has caused a dramatic drop in the park's visitors. With rides and seats empty, Ocean Park's earnings are now dangerously low. Chief Executive of Ocean Park, Matthias Lee, says the company is under great pressure. We estimate that we lost more than 1 million visitors from February to April. Under the situation of no revenue, we are more tightly controlling operational costs. Despite its financial dilemma, Ocean Park continues to care for its marine animals. One of their caretakers says he's worried about the park's future, but is still keeping the animals' best interests at heart. Because our job is to take care of the animals, no matter whether we have the coronavirus outbreak or not, we will continue to take care of them. Ocean Park is currently requesting almost $700 million from the government. If it doesn't receive the aid, the marine mammal park could go out of business by the end of June.
And that's all for today's news. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Paul Graney.